to people who are in need of these services. So I'm very excited about this session, and I want to open the floor to Karen Marie Shaw, who will give.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out. We really appreciate it. And welcome to our mental health event today. We have two presenters that we are fortunate to have join us. One is Sybil Greenhut, who she is going to be speaking on mental health awareness, as well as Bonnie Clem. Bonnie is here. And Wolfgang will give you a brief bio on both of their backgrounds, but they're here today to talk about mental health. How do you recognize when someone has a mental illness, and what are the resources that you can access either for yourself or for them under those circumstances? Also, I wanted to share with any of you who are new, the Lifelong Tacoma program is a program that works with nonprofits and with the Tacoma Village for collaborations to provide resources. There's information on the table, and I have information with me as well. So thank you so much, and we are going to welcome Sybil and Bonnie here today. Thank you.
So I can talk again. I'd like to describe a little bit who Mrs. Greenhut is. Sybil Greenhut is the program manager for mental health for seniors and people with disabilities. That's an important function of the Department of Health and Human Services. She is located in the building for aging and disability services, and she has a lot of experience. She has worked for 30 years in the field of behavioral and health, and she has worked with senior health for the past 16 years. So she's an extremely experienced person, and we are very glad to have her here with us. Thank you.
Hello. I'm going to start with Adult Protective Services because this is also a program within the community. I, too, have been probably about 30 to 35 years of working as a social worker, 20 in Adult Protective Services, and the last 7 as supervisor of Adult Protective Services investigations. People hear that word and they get and I could go on and tell you I've done adult daycare and I've gone, in nursing homes and hospitals, but that's not the issue. I think that it's pretty clear that both Sybil and I have been very much involved in working with people who have needs, or those who need to know what they need to know in order to help family and neighbors and community, which is what we're looking at this point in time. So I'm going to do my Adult Protective Services component, and then Sybil will do her mental health component. And I'm really glad to be here. So it's great to see all of you, and it's wonderful to spend time with all of you. Okay, I lead the Adult Protective Services unit in Montgomery County. We have 24-hour referrals, so if anybody sees anything, which we're going to talk about as we go along, if anyone sees anything that they're concerned about and you think it's 9 o'clock at night because you've been thinking about it and want to know who to call or how to call, you can call at any hour at our 240-777-3000 number, and we have someone who will answer the phone. At night, way in the night, we have a worker who goes from 3:30 until midnight. She's an after-hours person, and she's based at the crisis center. And then the crisis center takes over the phone, but you never have to worry about making a phone call or when to make a phone call, or you're feeling like you'd like to get all the information immediately so you don't forget, and you can always call at any time. So we have 24-hour referral, and that is our number. Okay. What is Adult Protective Services and how is it defined? First of all, believe it or not, Adult Protective Services is to protect people, vulnerable adults in the community. What does that mean? We'll go into that shortly, but it's actually defined and by the state mandate. So we have COMAR regulations that are within the state. It's Article 14 of the Maryland Annotated Code. And a lot of people will say, why can't every call that we make be a call that we will respond to? Well, we have to see where a vulnerable adult needs help, because a lot of folks can find help on their own by getting a hold of resource information, by getting a hold of the Beacon, the resource books that we have out. But vulnerable adults can't necessarily do it. So the definition of a vulnerable adult is someone who is 18 or older, because we only work in adult protective service. They have child protective as well, but we're adult protective. And we work in the community, and they have to be at least 18 years old. But then they can be any age from 18 to 104 and 105, who are people we've been working with. So it's what's really very, very neat, I find it's very, very neat, is that we have such a longevity today that we didn't have 30 years ago. And it feels wonderful because we can spend more and more time with people that we want to spend time with, but we want to make sure that they're safe. So the 18-year-old in the community who is vulnerable lacks either some type of mental capacity or some type of physical capacity, or both. And it doesn't need to be extreme, but it needs to be something where the person cannot necessarily make a plan. If you can make a plan, if a person is in a wheelchair, in a motorized wheelchair, in a scooter, whatever, and they can make a plan on their own, that's wonderful. If they need help, you can still call the 3000 number, but they don't necessarily need Adult Protective Services. So our investigations are for abuse, and I think everybody really has begun to understand what abuse actually is. It's cruel, it's humane, and it's malicious, and it's an act by a person, and that's how we define it. We investigate abuse, and sadly enough, when I started in Adult Protective Services 20 years ago, I didn't see as much abuse. I believe that it's not that there wasn't abuse. I believe that people didn't know about it, which is why we're talking about it so very much now, because we really want to make sure that everybody knows what these different criteria are. So with abuse, we're seeing more and more abuse, and that's because people are reporting. Neglect. Neglect is very crucial, and a lot of the criminal issues that come out are generally from neglect, because it's somebody who leaves mom alone, who can't do anything for herself, or dad, or their child, because we have ID, which is intellectually deficient in some manner, and these are part of our group as well that we work with. So if you see that people are looking poorly, that clothes are terrible, their clothes haven't been, it's been on for quite a few days, where there's not adequate food and people are beginning to look really poorly. There's no medical treatment when something happens, which is so easy to have happen, but it doesn't always happen, and that's the big problem. Or if we just need somebody who needs some therapy, some shelter especially, or some supervision, if that isn't available and it moves towards somebody really getting very, very sick, that is neglect, and it is a criminal aspect. Also, we work with people who self-neglect, and that's very interesting. You know, I can't see the people over here, but I hope you know I see you. I'll try and move this way a little bit. Okay, so self-neglect is an area that a lot of jurisdictions across the country, and I mean, Adult Protective Services is through all the states. However, they're all done differently. Some people only work with people from 18 to 60 for some reason or other. Some people work with those who are only in 65, and so it's very different across the country. And in DC, they don't work with self-neglect. And self-neglect is crucial because this is the point in time where we can't seem to realize maybe, I mean, if I'm sure that within the next 5 years, I'm not going to be remembering a thing at all because somehow, I'm starting to get a little worried. But the reality is that if you're not noticing that there are problems and you're living alone, a lot of times people will be in their houses alone with no help for a very long time. And that doesn't have to be. That's where our groups, our villages, our neighbors take a part in that. And what we try and do is never, the last thing we ever advocate for is for someone to lose their housing. We always like to see that there's pieces of different services that go into place and make people independent. That's the most important component that we're always looking for. And the last part is something that we didn't even look at for a long time, but we do now, and that's exploitation. I mean, it can be physical exploitation, which we get a lot with the ID clients, but it also can be financial exploitation. And there are so many scams. I am sure how many people have received a scam phone call on their phone? All of us. I was at an exploitation training with National Adult Protective Services a number of years ago. We were talking about financial exploitation, and someone got a call on one of the people who was talking about it got a scam call on their phone right off the bat. We get it constantly. And it's really hard. It's really hard for people who are so used to being aware but also trusting, because this is something that didn't happen in the past. But believe me, it's happening now, so we need to make sure that you know how to protect yourselves. Everybody, including myself, I'll go to my husband and say, is this a scam? And I'll say, yeah, why, you didn't recognize it? But anyway, the point is that, yes, we all need to be aware of scams because they're horrible. Okay, that's exploitation. Now, this is what we're advocating for. We're advocating for people who know to make a referral. And it's a call to our 24-hour line, which I had mentioned before. But beyond that, there's some very important components. The person who calls, if they want to be anonymous, they can be anonymous. When I was in the field for 13 years before I became a supervisor, when people would say, who called and got me in trouble? And I said, no trouble. Don't worry about that component. But the point of the matter is that we never like to say your daughter or your son or your daughter-in-law or your next-door neighbor or a good friend. We don't want to do that. And so we try very hard to say if people want to be anonymous, be anonymous. If you make a call, any report is fine. You're not supposed to decide what's happening. We're supposed to investigate it. So if you think that somebody's in trouble, please make that call. We'll need more and more staff as we go along. And in fact, we have just been given another person to investigate because the cases are coming very, very frequently now, and that's very, very good because we're saving people right and left. The case is only as strong as the phone information. That's the important part. A lot of times people will talk about small issues and not say, I have been hit by my uncle or my mother. Somebody threw a shoe at me. I mean, these are real honest things. I'm not saying somebody threw a shoe because I made it up. Actually, these are cases we've gone out to investigate. So the case is as strong as what you can describe is happening. And the more you can describe, the better the chances are of finding a way to get help for people who need help. The one thing that we have a big problem with is very often if we've seen somebody around the neighborhood, if we've seen somebody go to a day program of some sort, if you see somebody in a senior center or And you notice that they have bruises, and especially the kinds of bruises that deal with appendages. Your arms, sometimes legs, depending on, feet, hands. These are the areas that people get pulled on sometimes. These are the areas that people, have people punch them in that way. And there's all sorts of other ways as well. But what we end up doing is, if we don't have it reported right away, we're never going to be able to do anything about it. Because bruises change very, very rapidly. I remember a time when I was called to go ahead and check out a bruise. And it had happened at 7 o'clock in the morning in a very lovely assisted living facility. I went out there at about 12 or 1 o'clock, and the nurses had been icing this person's arms for probably a very long time. And when I went to look, there was nothing to see. It had turned all sorts of colors, and we had lost what we usually look at, which are, if you can see, or if I can describe this to you, it's often somebody pulling your hand, pulling your arm, spraining something, turning something around, changing diapers sometimes when people get their diapers changed. If it's done in a way that's harmful, you'll find marks all along people's thighs. And so that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. Okay. Whoops, I'm hitting the wrong thing here. Okay. Okay, we don't investigate in hospitals. That's done by the police. The nursing homes are also done by the police. And what is it? OHCQ, Office of Healthcare Quality. Facilities for people with developmental disabilities, which we now call ID, we don't investigate there. And psychiatric facilities, which we also don't investigate there. So as you report, you may make any kind of a report. You may do it if you want, and you may not do it if you don't want. The only situation that's different is that if you're a physician, a nurse, a social worker, a psychologist, a nursing home administrator, or another type of administrator, police, or medical or mental health worker, if you don't report what you see, you're actually mandated. Now, people are not being caught having to pay a certain fine or a certain fee, but it really is important that people who know and know what to look for really should be doing the looking. Okay, there we go. What do we do in our investigation? Whoops. Okay. What we're doing is we can never make all the bad things go away. We'd love to do that. Wouldn't it be nice to have one of these wands that, you sort of go this way and that way, and you've made all the problems get better, majorly better. We like to get people better as well, but it doesn't happen. It happens sort of in degrees. So if you make a phone call for a family member, like your neighbor, let's say that, but especially if it's a mother-in-law or a father-in-law, a mother, a father, etc. If you're making a report like that, it's going to take little steps before we have big steps in order to make everything get totally better. But at least we're going to make it get safe. So it's very important to make these reports. And it's very important as people who really know in this room. There's no question that this is a group of people who understand what we're talking about. You are the people who will be the best people to do the calling, the best people to keep an eye on what's happening. And if there is abuse, neglect, self-neglect, or financial exploitation, and now the fiduciary institutions are supposed to call us and let us know every time they think something is seriously wrong with the person's finances. However, the issue is that sometimes we don't get that information for a very long time, again. So if you know that someone is no longer buying food from the supermarket because they don't have money and they used to have money, you might want to say, what happened? If you feel like it. If you feel like it. This is not a demand. It's just sort of this is what we'd like to see happen. Okay. a lot of people talk about guardianship and how to make that happen. How many people here actually are aware of guardianship or, okay. Okay, so guardianship is actually the last intervention. It is never the first. We always try to see if we can get a person in a good situation, get them safe, that's better than going ahead and trying to do the last intervention. But sometimes the last intervention occurs because it has to, because safety is now at great risk, especially with finances right now, especially with finances. So, but remember, this is always court ordered. Everything that happens with guardianship is court ordered. There needs to be two doctors, two, I know. All right. There has to be two competency evaluations, and they have to be available within the 1 year, one very soon and one within 1 year. So remember that if you're thinking of somebody that you really care about who might need that because you can't help them anymore. That's what the situation is. Okay. What are some of the signs of abuse? Well, with physical signs, as I mentioned, there can be black and blue marks, there can be bruises, there can be cuts, there can be wounds. We had a man who spent a lot of time in his life working in hospital situations where they would decide whether somebody had been abused or not. And interestingly enough, a ring, for instance, like this one, is one that can make a real picture, because if they're scratching someone with it, they're not only scratching, but you're going to have the sign of the ring. So I like this ring too much, and I wouldn't do that to anybody anyway. But there's a lot of big rings. There's watches that people get. So anyway, what are the physical signs? The bruises are of that nature. There are burns. There are unusual injuries sometimes, and you really wonder what to do about it. If a person just is not taking care of themselves the way they once did, it could be some signs of dementia, but it could also be confusion, but it could also be just depression, and it can also be because somebody is actually hurting them in some way. If somebody is undernourished, dehydrated, they're not getting their medical conditions taken care of. Those are all signs of abuse. And behavioral signs, as I mentioned, depression, confusion, anger, fear, hopelessness, shame. I don't want to go too long, so somebody's going to have to, go or get the hook, and get me off here, and I'll be glad to go off as soon as you tell me to. Some of the behavioral signs are confusion, forgetfulness, anger, depression, fear, helplessness, and the worst part of all, I think, for an adult, no matter where they are in their life cycle, is when they have to feel shame. And so this is something we also feel very serious about. We find with social signs, but also we find with what is the most dangerous part for an older adult who needs some help. We find that people with violence, of drug abuse, are dangerous for the person. They tend to be a little bit less reliable. Same thing with being isolated. If we know somebody's been isolated for quite a long time, we're going to take a good look at why this is happening and how they're doing. And because we care. I mean, it really is, it's one of the best things I ever did in my whole life was become an adult protective services worker. And if people feel like they can't speak freely, which happens very often, that's also another sign. It's a social sign. Okay, financial is usually the unusual bank account activity. And we're seeing over and over now, we're seeing people who have made friends with somebody who lives in their own home all alone, and then they become their best buddy. And they end up going to the bank because a lot of folks have saved an awful lot all our lives, all of us. And, there's money to be had. And so the banks are really careful about that. They're trying to see who's who. I wish they would take more pictures because we would do much better. If there's unpaid bills, that's also a financial sign. If there's a name on a check that doesn't look like the name that the person has always signed, the signature is different, that's also a big problem. So what we can do is really advocate. We can reduce the risk, and you don't have to do anything but make a call, so to speak, or do whatever you want to do. There's also a point in which you can stabilize people and they can live on their own and be independent, and we can do that. We can advocate for various resources that people might not know about. We can do case management, which means assessment, planning for a person, linkages, monitoring, and really the most we really want to do is try to keep the person feeling like they're very important and responsible and respectful, and that's the very important part. If we could see that in all of the U.S. alone, then maybe we could push it on and further. I think we talked a little bit about guardianship. Does anybody want to know more about it than I actually told you? Probably not. Okay. Areas for consideration. This is something that we really need to be looking at, because often we have a person who's a doctor will say, not a doctor, mind you, but just somebody will say, well, that person's competent, but we need to look at how capable they are of making decisions. Are they capable of making a decision to take care of themselves properly? Are they capable of making decisions? And sometimes they may choose not to take care of themselves properly, but we need to know that what is their capacity. And competency is actually law. Self-determination. I had a man who was lying on a bed it was a hospital bed in a house that was no longer being used, but he still owned it. He had no sheets, no jammies, just like a little robe. He had his phone, he had his cell phone, and he was totally competent. He could make his phone calls, he could do everything he wanted to do. I felt it was a terrible situation for him to be in because nobody was even bringing food on a regular basis. And all he had were these big ice cubes that he had in a big cup, and he would just go through one of those in a day. That's not good. But I kept on saying to him, why are you staying here? You've got another house, a couple of blocks down. You have family who would, be glad to help you out. I'm not sure for sure, but anyway, I would like to think that would be the case. And what he said was, I want to be here. This is what I want. So I wasn't convinced that he was safe, and so I called our psychiatrist, our consulting psychiatrist, and he and this gentleman had a little bout. They were having a little test to see who would answer better questions. And when we left, our psychiatrist said, he's fine. He has a right to make every decision he wants to make, whether it's a bad decision, as long as he has capacity, that's okay. So let's remember that when we look at some people. They may say, I don't want to leave this house because I love my animals and somebody will hurt my animals. And you know what? I might be one of those people. So we know that that happens. So that's one area of self-determination. As long as people have capacity and can make a plan for themselves and can tell you why they're doing it, they have the right to do it, and we get out of their way. There are patterns of family violence, and we have to be very careful about that, especially where you have some youngster, a grandson, a son, a daughter, a granddaughter who have been using drugs or maybe have some mental health issues, and that's what Sybil will be addressing. And as I've said over and over, the least restrictive is the most important, and that's what we have to remember when we're working with people. Everybody knows when they're not being respected. I used to work in serious areas of nursing homes, or I would go and visit at least, and people knew when they were being respected, and they would turn into people again. And then we would all go away, and they would be back like this because they didn't have the kind of stimulation they needed. So it's very important to realize all the considerations about what people need. And as I said, these are challenges. Is the person demented or not? Is the person, will they agree to charge if they get abused? Oftentimes the answer is no. Can the person testify? Sometimes our state's attorney's office does that on a regular basis. They're wonderful, and they're good with the folks as well. If we can't find a person face-to-face, because we get a call and we get all the information and the address. And if we go to the address and we knock on the door, I mean, I've called in through mail slots. I mean, truly, as a worker, when I was in the field and I knew somebody was in that house and I noticed she was crawling, I called through the mail slot until she opened the door. Now, I was a real nag, but it was very, very important, and we really did make a difference in what happened. So, but if we can't do a face-to-face, if after 30 days we've been going, yes.
To offer him help. Is it on? To offer him services, and he's so proud, and he doesn't want to feel like he's dependent on anybody. But I went over his house yesterday, and I just want to say I cooked some dinner, and I cooked too much. I just want to share this with you. And when I put it in the refrigerator and I looked in the freezer, nothing's in there. And I've offered him all type of home health and everything, and he doesn't want it. So what do you do with that in that case?
Well, often what we try to do in that circumstance is it's a baby step kind of thing for us as workers. I mean, we may have to go back at other times. We may have to go back. If we can just see this person, then we will keep on working with them if we feel that they're at risk. And so we will try to make a good association with that person, try to find respective things for them. You know, try to find what they were capable. A lot of times you see people who've done so many things through their life and now they haven't, and they just look broken down, and they're not. They're full of just wonderful personal issues. They're there's so many things that are wonderful about people. You just have to kind of find it. When you can develop that rapport, then there's a chance you can say, hey, how about Meals on Wheels? They're not too terribly bad. You know, I think that I've eaten some in times where I was, you know, starving, and somebody said, you know, let's go get, you know, one of the Meals on Wheels. We can also do the same thing, just talking to that person, not quickly. It's not going to happen overnight, but it does happen. You know, it's like the person with the mail slot. I mean, I was standing, and it was a very nice neighborhood, and I had a very tall nurse partner. She was about 6 feet, and then I'm 4'9". The two of us really looked stupid in that door, you know, on the steps, on the steps. But let me tell you, stupid is fine when we're trying to fix something. And this is the kind of thing where you may have to do things in very slow process. They may not like to take food from people because then they'll feel like they owe them something. So maybe the Meals on Wheels and paying for it, if they can, is fine. A lot of people don't like to be told what to do. Sometimes folks don't want people in their house because they might see alcohol, they might see other things which they really shouldn't have. We try to work with that as carefully as we can because people have rights. So that's, you know, we work it in little steps, and maybe at some point, if you make a referral, we can see what we can do. Our workers they're the same way. They're full of life, and they know to make somebody feel like they're pretty important. And that's how it works. But it takes a long time. I'm sorry.
I'm curious about a situation in which it's not clear whether a person might be being abused or not. I mean, there was somebody in this city, and I knew that their mother was living with them, and the mother hadn't been seen for a long time. She hadn't been out. And everybody knew that the last time they had seen her, she was having difficulty with mobility. So it wasn't necessarily that there was any abuse involved. But there was sort of a general appearance of neglect in the house, on the outside of the house. And nobody had seen her for a year. And so I came to the city and I asked, and they suggested, well, one approach was to go to the county, to this protective service. But I wouldn't have any evidence at all because nobody had seen her. I had no reason to know whether or not she was being abused or not. And the other thing was, I said, well, I think that's too formal a process to get the whole case management apparatus and the county involved, and I'm somebody who doesn't know and all of this, and I'm reluctant to get the whole county, may I say, bureaucracy involved. No offense, I've worked for government for many years. And they said, well, you can call the police, and they'll go over and look. So I did talk to the police, and they sent somebody over, and I didn't hear anything more. And after about 2 weeks, I went to the police dispatcher, and she said, well, we sent a policeman over there, and they knocked at the door, and nobody answered. So they came back, and that's it, case closed. So,
Well-
I mean, I couldn't figure out a way for the middle case where I don't see a person that's abused or bruised or starving to death, but I'm just not sure.
Right. No, absolutely. That is a wonderful question. And the whole conundrum is that we have all the red flags, and there's sheets out there on red flags. If you haven't seen somebody in a year and nobody's answering the door, we're really concerned. And often we ask for the police for a welfare check. And then they try a little bit more, but they don't have the right to go into the house. So you can make that referral, and a lot of our staff do a lot of calls ahead of time to try and find other people who might be family, to just call and say, oh, I just know Mrs. Jones, and I was just wondering how she's doing or whatever. We do that. We can do that in Adult Protective Services investigations, because people could be lying in bed not alive. We've had that happen before. But they can also be poorly treated. Or they may have died and nobody knows it. And they might be collecting the Social Security checks as well, may I say. So there's a lot of that. I think the best bet is to make, the bureaucracy is there, but it's in APS, we're kind of, people only do adult protective services or mental health if they really love it, because it's a very hard process. You know, we get turned down by a lot of people who say, you guys, we don't want you guys. We're certainly not looking to be the most popular people in the whole area. And so I would make that referral, and we might not tell you this, but we might look at the person's name and look back to see if we've ever had them on our computers, and take a look and see what was going on then, a year ago, or how long ago it was. So we can take all of that information and look a little bit further, and we do. And we do. So never be fearful that you're making a mistake. I know we had one daughter who was very angry. She said, I'm very angry that you called Adult Protective Services and accused me. And I said, we didn't accuse anything. But we are awfully glad we've seen your mom and she's okay. Or we're more concerned about your mom and feel that we need to do this, 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 and this. So, but that's not for you to do. And you can remain anonymous if you want. And nobody will consider you anything less than a good citizen, seriously. So it's far better to try that than not to, because we don't know. It could be everything's okay. And I know with the welfare check, the police can't go any further if the door isn't open. So some of the times we've gone around different times, some of my staff will zip around certain areas and see if they can find somebody where they didn't see them earlier in the day. Maybe somebody's home, and they'll try to get in as well. So there's a lot of ways to do that.
Maybe we should leave the questions to the end.
Absolutely. If we leave the questions to the end, we will stay here as long as you want, and I am just about done. I apologize for how long I have been. I could go on forever and ever. You need to tell me to stop. And I'm going to stop right now. But let me say that you're all extremely intelligent, and you know what's going on. The only thing I will say is that if there's an emergency, we go out within one day, usually 1 hour. If it's something that has been called in and we think we can hold off, we can go as long as 5 days. And that's really the big issue there. So I thank you so much for helping us to know a little bit more about what you can do and what is going to be helpful. And now I'm going to introduce my partner, Sybil Greenhut.
Okay, I am going to see if I can get my PowerPoint up for you. That's my first mission. My challenge. Where can I get it? I think help is coming. F5. Okay, you're right. Okay. Well, now you know that we all have different little deficits and different strengths. My name is Sybil Greenhut, and I'm going to be talking to you about behavioral health. And the reason I refer to it as behavioral health and not mental health is because, very fortunately, we now look at both mental health issues and substance use issues, which are very frequently occurring together, not always, but frequently. So we now are looking at behavioral health, where we're looking at these aspects in the person that would be considered behavioral health. As I said, I've been in this field forever, and 30 years is nice. It's probably even longer. The last 16 years, I've been working with seniors, and what I found when you work with seniors, we are very, very complex. There are so many things going on that we really have to consider. We're looking at depression, we're looking at substance use, but seniors have frequently a lot of life changes that are going on at this point in their life, which I'll talk about, and that really affect the picture. Seniors have medical problems. There's physiology. Things change when you get older. Medical problems can come up. They affect your mental health. Medications people are taking for their medical problems can have great effects on people's ability to function, people's mental health. There's the question of whether you're seeing a dementia. Are you seeing someone who's depressed? Is this person someone who's experiencing a delirium, which can be caused by physical issues such as dehydration, intoxication? It's very complex. And I'm glad I got into this area later, because I think you bring everything with you when you're working with seniors, because we're very complex. It's not quite as easy. According to the Surgeon General, 20% approximately of people over 55 have some type of mental health issue that is not a normal part of aging. We consider nothing a normal part of aging, because that's a great big myth. What's interesting is that seniors in Montgomery County and nationally are around 13% of the population. There are only 7% of people who get psychiatric services. That means that they're really underutilizing these services compared to the numbers of people there are. Why? Frequently, doctors, neighbors, family think this is a cognitive issue. This is a dementia issue. This person isn't depressed. They're just not sort of responding. Sometimes there's a focus on the physical disorder, and they feel, no, this person has anemia. This person has just had a heart attack. Wouldn't you be depressed too? And they're focusing on the physical issue and really not realizing there can really be a clinical issue going on. either alone or at the same time. Again, there is that myth that a lot of these things are just a normal part of aging. There can be a lot of underreporting by the people or the family about psychiatric symptoms. Sometimes there is forgetfulness there. Forgetful people get depressed. People with dementia get depressed. But there can be some forgetfulness there, so they may not be reporting these symptoms. There's a lot of social stigma about mental health. People are going to think I'm crazy. People are going to think there's something wrong with me. People will think I'm crazy and they won't want to associate with me. Not just the client has these issues, family have these issues too. They don't want to really acknowledge someone in their family is schizophrenic, someone in their family has bipolar disorder. They don't want to say those words. Those words are almost as bad as saying the word cancer, which people say more now, I think, than schizophrenia. There's also a tendency to focus on the physical problem as people get older. I think that may be forefront in their mind. When they go to the doctor's office, frequently the doctor will say, tell me why you're here today, what's wrong, and he's asking for some type of physical answer. So sometimes the mental health issues don't get addressed. There are a lot of life changes. One of those circles up there in the beginning were, what are some of the things that happen to seniors that may affect their feelings and their emotional well-being. A lot of losses that seniors can experience. Okay, seniors can be losing friends. Seniors can lose family members. Seniors retire. With that, they may lose that identity. They're no longer a nurse. They're no longer a social worker, a lawyer. And that's a loss to some people. With that, there can be a loss of economic status. Some people move. They have to relocate. They lose their home, not just when they move, but they lose the support network, their friends, their neighbors, the people they knew when they move to a different location and downsize. Also, there's not as much focus on the future and hopes for the future. And a lot of these losses cause a lot of grief, bereavement, sadness. And I'm going to talk about that later because there's a lot of confusion. When is someone grieving? When are they depressed? When are they grieving? When are they depressed? It's really interesting. There are differences, and we'll talk about it. There are losses in ability to function, which can affect your mood. If you have any kind of medical problem which causes decreased mobility, break a hip, inability to walk, certain diseases, all of a sudden you may not be able to drive. You may not be able to climb up on a bus. You may not be able to use transportation. You may not be able to walk. And that can lead to a lot of isolation. Isolation can lead to loneliness. Loneliness can lead to a depression. There can be reduced self-esteem if you're experiencing losses. There can be family conflicts that are going on as you age and family members are not totally accepting or knowing what to do. There can be conflicts going on in the family. Also, with losses, there's problems dealing with your leisure time. You can be more bored. If you can't get around and can't get to places, you really can be home more. You can be developing, boredom. A lot of medical problems can affect your mood. Medical problems can cause physical distress, pain, disability, problems sleeping, sensory things such as your hearing or your sight. These are all things that can contribute. When you're not hearing well, you're sort of really cut off to a certain degree from what's going on around you. Also, when you can't see that well. Again, these can contribute to a reduced mobility. And any kind of cognitive change is certainly going to affect how you interact with people, what you remember, what you can process. That's going to affect what's happening with you. So we're getting into depression. Depression affects around 10% of the population. Seniors, 15%. Again, there are a lot of these life issues that are going on that can contribute. They don't always cause a depression, but there's certainly factors that we see in the senior population. What is depression clinically? Okay. Clinically, a depression is, the first two are very important. Either a depressed mood, seeing someone who's sad, hopeless, tearful, empty. A decreased interest in things that they used to be interested in. They're not taking pleasure in these things. The things I'm listing have to be there for at least 2 weeks, not just waking up and having a bad day or having a bad weekend. Or there's changes in weight. Some people lose weight, some people eat more and gain weight. There's changes in sleep. Some people, when they're depressed, sleep all the time. Some people can't sleep or wake up very early in the morning. There's changes in movement. Sometimes people get very agitated, and you'll see their movements are very quick, and they're moving very quickly. Sometimes they're very depressed, and they're very slowed up in their speech, in their movements, and that's what you may see. There can be fatigue. There's a lot of worthlessness with depression. People feel like their self-esteem has gone down. They feel very guilty about themselves and what they can't do. It's very hard to concentrate when you're depressed. It's very hard to make decisions when you're depressed, so there's a lot of indecisiveness. And people get suicidal thoughts, and we will definitely talk about suicidal thoughts, because suicide occurs at high rates in this age group. Depression doesn't exist alone. We talked before about having medical problems and having mental health issues. It's very complicated when you're dealing with medical issues. Medical issues are very, very related to depression. A lot of medical conditions can cause depression. Heart disease, there's like a 20% correlation of depression in heart disease. That's before heart attack, just the heart disease. Cancer, any kind of endocrine disorder, anything that's slowing up your metabolism. So we see depression in many medical disorders. The Parkinson's, strokes, anemia, a lot of medical conditions can cause, and the depression can actually affect the recovery from these diseases. So that's very linked again. A lot of medications that people take for medical problems can cause depression. Blood pressure medication can cause depression. A lot of medications that people may take for sleep, any kind of sedative, anti-anxiety medication, pain medication, anything, think of things that are slowing your system down, can really cause a depression. Parkinson medication, which is a double whammy because there can be depression associated with the Parkinson's, and then you get put on medication for the Parkinson's, Sinemet, that can cause a depression. Hormone changes, we all know about depression related to hormone changes, PMS, menopause. Hormones affect our mood, so hormonal changes, steroids, prednisone, your anti-inflammatories can cause depression. So you've got seniors are taking more meds than other people, and these meds themselves, as well as the diseases, can cause a depression. So what's the difference I talked about before? People can have a lot of losses, and they can be experiencing a lot of sadness. What's the difference? When you're looking at grief, frequently you're looking at feelings of the loss, focusing on the loss, feelings of emptiness in relation to the loss. But all losses can really cause sadness. Losses can cause insomnia. Losses can cause a lot of the things I've listed below. Poor appetite. You have a financial disaster, or your house gets hit in a hurricane, or, God forbid. There's a lot of losses going on there, and there's a lot of grief going on there. But you're feeling the loss, you're feeling the emptiness, but you're not feeling that inability to think of anything pleasurable at all. That's what you see in a depression. Your self-esteem is usually pretty well preserved, as opposed to feeling just worthless when you're feeling depressed. Dysphoria means the mood, a sad mood. That's likely to decrease over time as you start solving these issues. It also comes in waves. When you start thinking about this person, you may have lost a person, and this may have been very, very intense for a long period of time. It will decrease in how frequently it's occurring. Depression, the thoughts are pretty more persistent. They're not connected with a specific event. They may have started at some period of time, they may have started an event, but it stays pretty persistent. What are people thinking? People who are grieving are thinking about the things they've lost. People who are depressed are just very, very pessimistic. They are very self-critical. They have very low self-esteem. When you're thinking of death, a person who's grieving is usually thinking about, oh, well, maybe I could join the person that I'm missing so much. People who are feeling depressed sometimes view death as a way of not being able to deal with the depression. They may feel so worthless. They may feel their family is better off if they're not there. So there are big differences between depression and grief. I'm going to talk about substance use because substance use is so connected with behavioral health. Alcohol and medications. Alcohol is something that's just become a part of our society. So are medications, more so and more so lately. As we can solve more things with medication. We use alcohol in a lot of social situations, parties, celebrations, family gatherings. Medications are very helpful. People, get great results from medications. They're very helpful. We can have them around. And alcohol makes people feel more relaxed sometimes when they're in social situations. In the United States, 2.5 million people, older adults, are estimated to have a problem. What's a problem? A problem is drinking more than the recommended amount by the Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. It's a problem if you're drinking and it's going to interact with the medication that you need to take. It's a problem if it's causing a problem socially, with your family, with your job. That makes it a problem. So, how much should older adults drink? They say men, 1 drink a day. Women, 1 drink a day. It used to be 2. Some men will argue, I can drink 2. No, they're saying 1 drink a day, 1 drink a day. What's a binge? They're saying men more than 3, women more than 2. There should be no drinking. If you're taking a medication, if you have a medical condition which is going to be made worse by drinking, if you're going to drive or operate machinery, or if you have a history, certainly, of alcohol dependence or alcohol abuse. So that is suggested drinking. What's a drink? Have anyone noticed the size of wine glasses in restaurants get bigger and bigger and bigger? A size of a great big, when people come in and we talk about drinking and they say, oh, I only have 1 drink, what is the size of the glass? That's a very key question. So we have to talk in terms of ounces, okay? Because 1 drink, you can have a vodka in a very large glass. What's a standard drink? A can of beer, a single shot, 1 ounce, vodka of any kind of whiskey, 5 ounces of wine. Put 5 ounces in some of these big wine glasses. It's really very interesting. A small glass of sherry, a small aperitif. Risk factors. There are a lot of risk factors. Drinking is much more dangerous in seniors. Seniors have body changes, changes in their physiology. Seniors have medical problems we talked about. Seniors are taking medication. Changes. Seniors have less body water. What does that mean? You put alcohol in, it's more concentrated, less fluid. We have less fluid circulating, so 1 drink is going to be much more concentrated in my body than in a 20-year-old. Seniors are more sensitive to alcohol, and they have decreased tolerance. Tolerance means you drink more and more to get the same effect. Seniors have a decreased tolerance. What's next is very important. A lot of things slow down as we age. The metabolism in our stomach, our gastrointestinal tract, to metabolize alcohol is slower. It's in your system longer. Liver and kidneys slow down. Medications are in your system longer. 1 and 1 is much more than 2 when you're putting them together. Okay, this can really have effects on your physiology. A lot of medical issues that alcohol will affect: cardiac issues, immune, cirrhosis, bone density, ulcers, any kind of gastrointestinal problem. Alcohol will have a negative effect on depression. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. Initially, people drink and they say, oh, I feel so much better. Because initially, that first 1 or 2 drinks will disinhibit you, because it's slowing down those little inhibitory factors, but it is slowing you down, and you will wind up depressed. It's surprising, but it is a depressant. Medications can interact with alcohol. Older adults are much more likely, as we said. 83% of older adults take a medicine, prescription medicine. About 20% of all the drugs that are prescribed for seniors are in the benzodiazepine. That means anti-anxiety, Xanax, Valium, Ativan. That's not a good combination with alcohol. Can be sometimes you'll hear about inadvertent overdoses of people taking central nervous system depressants and alcohol, and that person will wind up, dead. Mixing alcohol with any medication will have serious effects on the effect of the medication. How do you know if someone's having a problem? As Bonnie said, you're out there. We love to talk to people in the community, and we love to talk to village volunteers. You're our gatekeepers. You're the people. We're at 401 Hunger for Drive, and we're not out there. We're not seeing all the people that you're seeing. So you're the people that we really want to call us. How do you know someone may be a problem? They be making excuses, hiding their drinking. They deny their drinking. They become really angry if you ask them about their drinking. What do you mean I have a problem? They may have blackouts. Blackouts are periods when you don't remember things that happened for certain periods of time. Very bad cases can have seizures. There can be certainly memory problems, confusion. You've talked to people who are intoxicated and or the next day didn't remember anything. People who are intoxicated can get very disoriented, slurred speech, blurred vision. Alcohol can dehydrate you, cause malnutrition, and frequently people will prefer to drink than eat, so that may be a bad choice. Also, if people are drinking against medical advice. Some of the other things are falls, unexplained bruises. So this is a lot of sorting out. A bruised person comes in. Are they being abused? Are they falling because their hip just went out? It's a lot of sorting of all of these areas when a case comes in. Is this a person who's been drinking too much? Is alcohol involved? Someone is drinking in the morning, you've got a real problem. Frequently, people will go into withdrawal and start drinking very early because they'll wake up feeling very shaky. People can be having sleep problems. That may be a clue. Their behaviors can change when people are drinking. Agitated, aggressive, abusive, suicidal thoughts, which we'll get to. Signs that someone may be having a problem with the medication. They're worrying, do I have enough pills? I better count my pills again. Do I have enough? Are they working? Maybe I need to take more. So they will start changing their dosages themselves. They will increase the dosage. They will decrease the dosage. People who are abusing medication withdraw socially. They get fatigued. They get tired. They're more preoccupied with getting their medication. There's a lot of increased sleeping. A lot of the meds that people abuse are your anti-anxiety or your sleeping medications. And there can be the same kind of injuries that Bonnie's talking about with self-neglect. That may be as a result of medication abuse. Suicide. We have to get to suicide. The suicide rate in older adults, it used to be the highest of any age group. It's now the second highest, only second to the group under 60, right under 60, the middle-aged, late middle-aged group. White males, 85 and up, have the highest rate of suicide. 50% of suicides are alcohol-related. Okay, so it certainly is a depressant, and it certainly will take away your inhibitions if you really want to kill yourself and you're thinking about it. Most common methods are 67% of firearms, poisoning, suffocation. Warning signs, people talking about wanting to die, withdrawing, writing, talking, joking about death, getting their affairs in order, giving things away, taking risks, acting reckless, driving, seeking access to the means, and we'll talk about the means, and dramatic personality changes. What do? Suicide threats are very high when there is a desire. People have mentioned it. They wish they weren't here anymore. If there's a history of previous attempts, that means not only do they wish they weren't here, they may have tried this before. Do they have a plan? Do they think about it? Most people, if they don't want to be here, they start thinking about it. How would I do it? I don't want to be in pain. I want something that's quick. They start doing it. And then your next question is, do they have the means to carry this out? Do they have a gun? Do they have a lot of pills? The big thing is talk about it. And I'm going to get to how do you talk to people. The biggest thing is to talk about it. You are not going to give someone the idea, oh, what a great idea. I never thought of that. I think I will kill myself. Thanks for giving me that suggestion. People do want to talk about this, and I think if you open it up, and we'll talk about some ways to open up a conversation, not that you are going to be the therapist. We don't want you to do, if you want to know a little bit more, this may be a family member, a good friend of yours. We're going to tell you who to call if you really have concerns, but we want you to talk about it. When you talk to a person that's depressed, tell them what you see. You're really looking like you've been feeling down. You really look like you're really upset. You look like, you've just lost your best friend. Are you talking to anyone? Do you have anyone to talk to? Are you talking to a family member? Are you going to see someone? Would you like to talk to someone about the way you're feeling? The way you're feeling must be really upsetting. Would you like to talk to someone? Alcohol, same thing. It seems to me that you've been drinking a lot lately. Every time I see you, you have a drink in your hand. Every time I see you, you're not out in the morning. I never see you before 3 o'clock. How often do you drink? Do you drink every night, or you drink just on Saturday night? Would you like to talk to someone about this? Because this can really affect your medical problems. It can have a big effect with medication. Then when you talk to someone who's suicidal, I don't want to be here. Respond to what that person is saying. You really sound like you don't want to be here or go on anymore. You really sound that way. Are you thinking about taking your own life? We try not to say, do you think about hurting yourself? Hurting yourself is very different than suicide. A lot of people think about hurting themselves. So we try to say, are you thinking about taking your own life? Have you ever tried that before? How would you do it? That's the plan. If you're really thinking about it, have you thought about how you would do it? Could you do it that way? Do you have a gun at home? Do you have a lot of pills? Balconies? We can't remove balconies. It's just good to know if the person's been thinking about that. Does a person have an alcohol history? As we said, alcohol is a big factor. And does the person live alone? Frequently, they don't have anyone to talk to, and they don't have the social support. So that's my message, is really talk to people. You're not going to give them any ideas. If you have concerns, and you have immediate concerns, we really want you to call the crisis center, which is, Bonnie's number is 3,000. Our crisis center is 4,000. Everything in the county starts 240-777-4000. If you have concerns, and we provide a service for seniors who are homebound, who can't get out. Many of you may know people like this, or many of you may be serving people like this. We will go to the home, and we'll send a therapist, a psychiatrist, and we'll work with people at home. There are brochures there. and you could call directly to the agency. We have a contract with an organization called Affiliated Sante, and they have therapists and psychiatrists that will work with people at home. If you're not sure, my number is on there. My cards are going to be out there. We're always there, most of the time. We're always there. We have voicemails. Does anyone have any questions for Bonnie, myself, anything that brought up things that?
I have been sober in AA for about 36 years. I've been going to meetings. And the thing that strikes me that of all the groups that other people that come through the halls and talk, the ones who seem to me to be least successful are the seniors. And a lot of times they'll come in and they'll be gone before too long. I'm one of the, I consider, I'm very grateful of the fortunate ones. And some people say AA doesn't work, and that's their opinion. It's worked for me. But I guess from your point of view, I mean, I've seen people in my family, my uncles and neighbors, I've seen a lot of seniors, you know, just go down the tubes and destroy their lives because of alcohol. It's been tragic. And I don't know what works. I haven't seen what works. Do you as an agency have any scientific evidence or anecdotal evidence? I mean, what do you do? What seems to work?
Well, we have treatment. The highest success rate of all treatment programs is AA. They do have the highest success rate. It's very hard to get rates because people who fail usually don't take part in surveys. So if people have gone back to drinking, they don't participate in surveys. But of all the surveys that were done, AA is the most successful. If there's someone who's drinking you're aware of and you can get them, sometimes seniors don't have transportation. A lot of meetings are at night. Getting where and whens, there are meetings during the day that people really need to know about, so just getting where and whens out there. And they're available, no charge, just calling up AA. Seniors, if they get into treatment, have the highest success rate of it. They're very successful in treatment. They follow instructions, they do their homework, they do their reading. They have very high success rates. It's getting the person connected. Yes.
Several comments. There has been whatever. Anyhow, there has been a look at what works, and what seems to work with the AAA is the fact that they connect you with somebody. Now, it has been mentioned that the same thing would work just as well with people who are depressed if they had somebody they could connect with, because it's the connection and having somebody to talk to that makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Another comment from a previous about the welfare checks, you know, police. One of the issues is that if they live in different jurisdictions, they won't do a welfare check mostly unless you go through your own police. We had to do this, and what happens is that the Tacoma Park Police will call or have a written request to the other police department to do the check, because it so happens that my wife calls a person almost every morning who starts drinking in the morning, and he disappeared off the,
Yep.
so we had to do the welfare check.
It's
And-
true. It's true what you just said. We had one experience where we really were concerned about someone. He had disappeared from a doctor's office, just took off, and we were trying to find him. We needed to do numerous welfare checks. And what happened was that where the man came from was exactly where they did the most effective welfare check. So that is viable, but it's always good to talk to the police and repeat. And as you did before,
Well, some require that you talk to your police, and for your police
to connect.
Exactly.
Right.
But don't give up, because we try not to give up, and generally we get somebody who gives us a report, if nothing else.
Another issue with another issue with the is that several of the ailments that you mentioned, heart attacks, MS, things like that, that go with depression, give you a booklet that deal with it. And one of the interesting things is that, for instance, there's in one of the booklets, there is not a single word about depression. What they talk about is mood change. And a side issue with that, and I'd be interested in hearing from you guys how you feel about it, is establishing dogs as official, what do you call it, animals? Huh? Companion animals for mood changes.
The Friendly Visitor Program at one point had well, they still have a Friendly Visitor Program through Mental Health Association in Montgomery County, and they also had a pets program. You're absolutely right, that can have a very beneficial effect. So I know Carol, yeah.
I have a question more than a comment. Is it my turn? This is sort of following what he just said. And the gentleman over there about AA and your admission that that's very helpful, often one of the most constructive programs for people with alcohol problems. Instead of hooking people who are depressed and isolated up with psychiatrists or psychologists, or what I think you mean by treatment, has there been any effort to set up programs that are something like AA for depressed, isolated people, that are like support groups where relationships are formed and people become connected as opposed to treated?
We run, it just so happens that we do have support groups at 5 different senior centers in Montgomery County. It's listed in that brochure. We call them drop-in groups because we feel like if we called them therapy groups, a lot of people with stigma issues wouldn't come because they don't want to identify that they're going to a therapy. But they are facilitated by clinicians, and they'll deal with whatever topics come up, or sometimes there'll be a specific topic that they're bringing up if there's nothing from the group. You're right. Getting people connected with other people with similar issues, too.
And actually, the Friendly Visitor Program has often done the job of what we couldn't do consistently. I mean, they go every week, and or more often, and they do what needs to be done. So that is also just another resource. It's not better or lesser, but it is a very good resource.
No, the Friendly Visitors are not. They are volunteers, and they have a training. They are supervised by a social worker and the Mental Health Association, and they train them in terms of working with, but they are not clinicians. So we work closely with them because it's a different level of, severity of need, and they may refer to us, or we may step down to them. It's a difference of, what type of help they need at the moment.
Okay, so I live in a senior residential community, Victory Tower, and it's for independent living, including seniors and persons with disability. Now, we have several people over there who are known alcoholics, and it's very clear to everybody. But the first thing is that they have to acknowledge that they're out. Otherwise, there's nothing to be done, it seems. They just drink, get into scrapes, police come over, and
You're right. People have to be willing, but it certainly is. It doesn't hurt. You never know when someone is ready. That's why you always talk to people. You never know when that window opens up, or you never know how bad they're feeling or receptive they're
Right.
feeling that day. So you keep on, keep connecting with that person and let them know what you're seeing and what your concerns are. You let them know. You cannot drag someone to treatment.
no.
We cannot order someone. We can't commit someone for substance use treatment.
Right. Okay, I mean, we do have a social worker, so
Yeah.
I guess she's doing that. Let me ask you mentioned drop-in groups, support groups, and friendly visitor program. Where's their description of that?
The Friendly Visitor Program isn't in my literature. I'm really sorry. That's another program that's done by Mental Health Association of Montgomery County. I can give you the number,
Right, that would be great.
301 492. Oh, I think 9300 or 4300. I think it's 4300.
4300.
I think it's 4300. I'm so sorry. It's the Mental Health Association of Montgomery County. They're in Rockville. Tammy Schmidt is the program director, and they'll be very happy for referrals.
Right.
In fact, I just got an email that they were interested in receiving referrals.
Also, I wanted to add that there's NAMI, the National Alliance
Sure.
on Mentally Ill, that has support groups for people who have mental illness as well as for their caregivers and families.
Family, yeah.
It's NAMI, NAMI. And if you put in, you can put in like your zip code and it'll give you the
NAMI,
closest one to you.
wonderful support. It sort of reminds me of Al-Anon, the way Al-Anon would be a support group for people that are in AA. NAMI's a wonderful support group for family members who are dealing with very similar issues, with various types of mental health issues.
Absolutely.
That's a-
There could be any support groups around here in the communities. Have you ever considered bringing in one of the county support programs here?
Well, we do have support groups in 5 of the county senior centers. Oh, here. Well,
There's
can do it.
there's always, if someone asks for something, generally it goes through, as you put it, the bureaucracy, but it does work eventually.
I will talk to them and tell them that there's interest in Tacoma Park. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's also something that if it's made known to us at the city level, part of the Lifelong Tacoma program and the village, that's something that we can, bring to the attention of the city manager, the deputy city manager, and see if that's a possibility.
And you certainly could connect, and let them know. We can certainly let them know there's interest in, having a support group. That'd be great.
We have a working group in the village of Tacoma Park, which is evaluating Friendly Visitors Program. We have not started yet, but they're thinking about
Through
it.
the village?
Through the village.
That's
excellent.
interesting. My husband is very involved in the Alney Home for Life, the village in Alney, and they are starting to do some reassurance calling, and they're also looking at working with Mental Health Association in terms of starting some type of friendly visitor service. So the villages are just taking off.
Thank goodness.
It's wonderful.
Thank goodness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I need a few minutes. You can cut. I need a few minutes. The first person I want to call on. Okay. Jennifer, you want to say something?